right, we'll call the meeting to order at 7:03. And I'll accept a motion for approval of the agenda or amendments thereto. Second. All in favor? Okay. Do we have any minutes?
Nope.
Okay, that takes care of that. Which is the reason for the next item. We're in serious need of a secretary. We tried desperately to do without one, but that
Next time.
can't happen because Pat just can't do the minutes because he has limited minutes, so to speak. So I need either a volunteer or, actually what I'm going to propose, since not all of us can always make the meeting, is that we elect a secretary and then at the same time have somebody who's going to be automatic backup in case that person can't come. So we don't have to have that discussion on the night when that person isn't here and say, well, all right, who's going to do it tonight? So an official elected secretary and backup secretary.
Deputy secretary.
Deputy assistant secretary, whatever you want to do, you want to call the person.
Deputy.
Now, before we do this.
Yes, straws.
No. Well, and weapons. The minutes for this get-together, in my opinion, and correct me if I'm wrong, don't need to be a word by word, blow by blow, what happened minute by minute, because that's why we have to tape. What's crucial for us for the minutes is for the secretary to record those things as perhaps a general topic which are discussed, and particularly those things which are actually decided. So it doesn't mean that taking the minutes is a constant writing exercise. Hit the highlights so that each of us can go back and say, oh yes, last meeting we said we were going to discuss this at the next meeting, or we made this decision about such and such. If anybody thinks that's too much of a skeleton, let me know, we can do it another way, but trying to make this easy on the conscripted volunteer.
Right in.
Wow, okay.
So we're going to revive the old English practice of impressment.
I don't know. I know there are two people who are sitting on this committee who have served as secretary when I chaired committees. They both done wonderful jobs. But I am loath to mention either name because they'll kill me. So, just need somebody who's...
I have no PC, so I have no means of doing that, so.
I'll volunteer if you keep them short and sweet.
Well, it's
Because otherwise,
short and sweet. Yeah.
you know, because like you say, really, technically, the only thing that really needs to be in there are motions that you're doing something, right?
Motions and action.
Yeah.
Motion and action, you know.
Okay.
So, I don't know, it's like, you know,
And Simone, if I ever get in my new house and I ever get my PC set up, I'm home.
Okay, let's give a round of applause to Paul.
Thank you, Simone.
know myself later.
The assistant deputy backup secretary would like to be.
I'll do it if Simone's not here. But
Thank you.
I have to find a ways and means to.
Well, if you handwrite them out, I'll type them for you. We can work together. Okay?
Or you can take advantage of the fact that those who who are not in attendance cannot protest.
No.
It happened to me 2 weeks ago.
Well, what can I say? All right, thank you very much. Both of you, round of applause. This is the deputy backup secretary. There we go.
We have an assistant to the assistant.
Yes, you just volunteered, Dan. Thank you so much. All right, that sounds fair enough. Okay, now, brief review of town meeting results. Obviously, we are free to move ahead as far as what we proposed in the town assembly. However, Taz and I have been grappling, that's a good word, with a bit of a glitch that has been following us through. And it's not a substantive thing, but I need to know how we want to handle this. I have a thought, but let me pass this out first. It has to do with, in section, and there are just paragraphs that describe Route 1. In section B of the original comp plan that we started working with, there was a phrase that we decided to get rid of. And we were going to replace it with our own paragraph describing mixed-use districts. And in several of the permutations of this, it did and didn't happen. And the same phrase was repeated in section C. So what I did, I was having a terrible time keeping it straight in my own head, so I decided not to spend 2 hours explaining it to everybody, but I typed it out in the order that it happened. So if you follow through on this, the original wording, if you look at B3, C3, and C3, there's 2 statements on the same page. That's what the original comp plan said. What we decided as of the April meeting, which was our pre-public hearing meeting where we finalized the language, we decided what you see in that second section. But what didn't happen in the translation of reformatting was the B3 piece got left out. So the public hearing document didn't have that piece. And then if you turn the page,
B3 isn't in the public hearing?
well, it's phrased as it was originally. The
Okay.
change was not in the public hearing document. And if you turn the page, we get to wording at town meeting, and here I use color because I was bored. It didn't make it into the wording at the town meeting document either. And there was also a change with the C1, that page got changed somewhere along the lines, the same stuff. The C1 also got changed a little bit as we went along. Tad, after town meeting, emailed me a copy that was supposed to be approved at town meeting, in which he put the B3 as we agreed, but it's not the same as it was in the town meeting document. And then the one in green is also just a little bit different than it should have been. Now, what you will see in tonight's final copy is that B3 is as we wanted it. So if you turn to page B3. That's what we said was going to happen, but again, that's not what was the town meeting.
That's not what was brought to town meeting.
No. And again, if somebody can prove me wrong on this, I'd be happy to hear it, because it would make life easier. But I went through all my documents, and I know which one was the town meeting one, because I had found it, so that if I had to answer questions, I wouldn't drop it all over the floor in the gym. So I'm sure this is the right copy. And then on page C1, you see we are still at the last section that I had included. So that's what we want, but it's not what we voted on. Now, I guess my question revolves around, first of all, is this simply because it's not substantive, it doesn't change the meaning of what we intended, nor does it change the meaning of how the whole thing works. Is this something that we can simply leave as a correction after the fact? Or is it sufficiently different where we should leave the wording that was at town meeting in the document and next go around change it as a correction?
Do you know what document was posted?
As far as I know,
I
it
have
was,
That's whatever was posted, that's what we need to make sure that,
okay.
whatever you have, you gotta make sure that whatever was posted as part of the warrant is the language that get voted on.
Okay, well, what I took to town meeting, I had gone into Todd the day before and I said, can you give me a hard copy? And this is what he gave me. Now, I was going to ask Tad if he was out that day, so I got it from Todd. So if that's what was posted, then that's what we voted on, and that's not quite what is here.
Well, then I think we need, number one, we really need to know what was posted.
Right.
Yeah,
But that should be different from what you're talking about, potentially, that's it.
yeah. Well, I would be delighted if I'm wrong,
Right,
because that means that this is right, and that's fine.
Mhm.
But on the assumption that what I have is what was posted, as I said, is that, can we let it stand changed, or should we just let it stand as it was and change it next time we go around?
Well, aren't we going to vote in November?
Not on
in
this.
November?
Well, you're
Well,
talking.
you could though. You
could.
could add it to the ballot, and you could add just, these changes were not correctly reflected in, and let them vote on it in November when they vote.
I don't know, is land use, are you planning on land use ordinance
I
amendments?
was not planning on taking land use to.
Okay, so it's probably not worth it dollar-wise to do that, because you're better off waiting till next June to correct it. Because if we print ballot, it's a gubernatorial election, and you're talking $400 just to program the machine for a question, as well as another $400 or $500 for ballot printing, while a regular town meeting is, or even a special town, you could have a special town meeting, send out a newsletter for $200 and it would cover you. So it's.
I don't think it warrants a special
No.
town meeting, but I would like to see it.
The next time, because we're going to hopefully have something to present at the next town meeting.
Right,
Otherwise, we will have wasted this year, and I'll be very unhappy.
right.
So presenting this as just part of the next
Yeah.
round, you know, in addition to this, I mean, in reading some of this, we need to go through and do the wordsmithing and correct some of the strange grammar and stuff anyway. So we're going to have a ton of non-substantive changes, of which this can just be one. So, if Simone will check and see which of these is correct. If we're going on the assumption that what I have is correct, is the general consensus, let it, you know, change?
Have a change next
Yeah,
town meeting.
yeah.
And,
I mean, we don't, at this point, we don't have a choice, we can't change it. So we have to leave whatever was voted there.
And your changes were made, your substantive changes were made in the body of it anyways.
Right.
Right, so that's what they would actually, that's more of an introductory thing,
Yeah,
But
so.
it's going to be an irritant, that we
Right.
went through the
Window
motions
dressing.
and the wordsmithing, and then it didn't make it where it was supposed to.
And what's listed as C, the bottom statement is really what's supposed to be in the B section as well. So it's not as though that statement is missing, it's just missing from one of two places.
Yep.
Everybody good with that? So possibly Tad has to make still another change, but
I'd make a comment, but I'll refrain from doing so.
Well, we're gonna be making another change in it.
yeah, it's not a huge
I know,
deal.
but I just, one, I'm irritated that it happened.
Well, so am I, and I'm also irritated at myself, because I caught it, but I didn't catch it soon enough. So I will take some responsibility for not having caught that on its way through the pipeline. Okay, now, on to bigger and better things, unless somebody else has anything else to say about town meeting. All right, now, since we're going to be discussing the residential areas, rather than have everybody having to leaf through their comp plan and go from page to page and back and forth and back and forth, I did cut and paste, and it's all on these 4 pages. And if you find this useful, use it, and if you don't, add it to your Kindle file. So this is nothing except, I said, cut and paste, so we have R1, R2, R3, R4, from both sections B and C, so there's a tremendous amount of redundancy, but it's all in the same place. Did I not get it down there? Sharon?
Oh, wait, no, I hogged too, sorry. It just seemed too small.
I know it's not mine, but I have more, so not to worry. I'm going to kick off the discussion with a proposal, and that will explain that. The residential area probably has a lot more problems than I'm aware of, but I'm aware of 2. One of them is that some of the boundaries, well, the boundaries in general don't tend to follow lot lines. And that would be an improvement to make it easier for the landowners of those lots if they did follow lot lines. So when you look at that map, and some of the little sticky things are not as obvious as others, but if you see a sticky thing cross a color boundary,
That means we cut a lot.
like between R1 and R4 on the upper left-hand quadrant, right, you've split a lot. And I will give you some documentation in a minute to tell you just how many times we did that. The other issue is that because R1 and R2 in particular, R3 as well to some extent, they were basically drawn in as blocks. It was looked at, we have a ton of houses here, let's just, make a shape around them and call that a residential zone. Within those blocks, there are some substantial plots of land. So you have, for example, in R2, 50, 60, 80 acre plots in a 2-acre zone. And because of the restrictions imposed because it's a 2-acre zone, the owners of those 50, 60, 70, 80 acre plots can't do some things that perhaps they logically should be able to do. The question is, how do we get that solved without having this whole thing look less like it does and more like somebody hit it with a shotgun? So, hence my proposal. I put this together and gave it to Tad this morning via email, and he did this to it because he thought it was plain. So let me pass out his copies, and I'll let him explain what the highlight's all about after I explain what the whole thing is all about. This is basically what the chart in your land use ordinance on pages 34 through 37 has all the little X's and P's and C's to tell you what's permitted. I personally find that very difficult to follow, so I put it in this format. What this shows you at the top is for R1, R2, R3. These are all of the permitted and conditional uses that apply to all 3 districts. If it has an asterisk, it also applies in R4. So as you see, there's a ton of stuff that is common with all of the districts. Okay. When you look at the bottom, there are a few things that are conditional only and only apply in certain districts. So R1 and R2, you can have an educational facility, public, private, or parochial school, or a residential multi-family dwelling. You cannot have it. That is not permitted in R3 and R4. You go to the next one, farm, retail, and museum are not permitted in R1, but are permitted in R2, R3, and R4, and so on down the line. So as I said, there's not a lot that's different amongst the districts, but there are enough things that perhaps we can get to those larger landowners in R1, R2, R3, perhaps. Tad, you want to explain your highlighted areas?
It's immaterial. That was just basically letting you know that those are mandated uses that are required under shoreline zoning. That's all. There's nothing spectacular about any of that. That's just what we require to put in our zones based on state mandatory zoning.
But still good to know, because if we decide to make a suggestion at the planning board, pull one of those, we can't. Right.
I would recommend not doing that.
Okay.
For obvious reasons. Could I ask a question then?
Sure.
We're diving right into uses right off the bat. And I guess my question would be, does that mean that the group is satisfied with both the intent of the 3 districts that we have specified in the comp plan and the current locations?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
But because we're so good at working backwards,
Might as well continue on.
I was working in that direction.
Okay.
Okay, the chart that you're in the process of looking at now, this reflects that map. I went through all of the maps and looked at all of the acreage. And basically in R1, I split it into R1 north and south, because obviously there's a division with R2 stuck in the middle there. R2 has a north and south component, and then R3 also does, if you catch that little tiny pinch on the lower right-hand side. in a nutshell, R1 has a minimum lot size of 1 acre, but and I picked 10 acres as a starting point, not tied to it, it was just a place to start. There are 32 lots that exceed 10 acres in that 1 acre minimum zone. In R2, 2 acre minimum, there are 45 10 acre plus lots, and in R3 there are 28 10 acre plus lots. And across in the chart itself, you'll see I broke it down, again, fairly arbitrarily, 10 to 19 acres, 20 to 29 acres, 30 to 49 acres, and then anything over 50 acres or above. So you can see that we have, a substantial number of 10 to 19 acres, and so on. The italics indicate the split lots. So we have 68 lots, 10 acres or more, which are not split between two districts, and 33 lots that are. The reason for the 4 parentheses is when it was split between R1 and R2, it had to be someplace only once. So, see the logic in that if you follow the asterisks. The reason I did this was I was aware of the fact that we had some people in town who had large lots, had no idea how many. If we were looking at 3 people, 3 lots, that's not a big deal. But here we're looking at 104 lots. That is, I think, a big deal. And for that reason, I'm suggesting that we take a look at that and perhaps address that. Now, that will kind of take us backwards to maybe redefining some of these shapes. But I kind of wanted to look at this piece first. Any questions before I go to handout number 4?
So the ones that have larger lots, like 30 or whatever, are not repeated back again in the 10. That's just a 30 lot parcel.
Right. Yeah. So in R1 North, there are a total of 4 lots that exceed 10 acres, 3 between 10 and 19, and 1 that is somewhere between 30 and 49.
You gotta redefine, you just said something about redefining the lots.
Well, redefining the boundaries of the districts. Like if we could reshape it and cut one of these lots, these large lots out, which we might end up doing depending upon how we handle
The
this.
comp plan shouldn't get that specific, actually.
Not necessarily. Let me do the next piece. What we're probably going to end up doing is making serious recommendations to the planning board based upon what we come up with here. Okay, the issues I've already mentioned, proposed solutions, make the district boundaries conform to lot lines. My suggestion would be if we decide to do that, call in those landowners, do the same thing we did the last time. Call in those landowners and say, what do you want to do with it? Do you want to be in R1 or R2? Do you want to be in R1 or R4, whatever the split happens to be? If we don't get a response from the landowner, then look at either the least restrictive place for them to be, or maybe look at site conditions.
Well, it's gonna make for an awful long description, ain't it?
No.
No, okay.
Well, I looked at the descriptions this afternoon, and the description of the comp plan is extremely general.
Yeah, I'm talking about, I don't care about the comp plan because it's what the planning
He's
board's
thinking
gonna
about the
have to
planning
do.
board's description.
So now the planning board's gonna have to take and describe all of those lots.
Well, just like they did with DB1 and DB2, you just draw it on the map, you go around the lots. Because the split lots are all on the boundaries.
But are you putting in text what all those descriptions are, or are you going to refer, Chad, is that, when you guys finally get done now, is that going to be in text what all those lot lines are?
With the designation as to what the preference.
Well, we only have 33 in town. That's not, I mean, it's not like we have 150, we have 33.
Well, for the time being, we can get caught up in the minutia of this and the details. If I may, I'd like to just float the concept first. If we can agree on the concept, then we can worry about the details. If the concept is garbage, then we don't worry about those details. The other solution, apart from the split lot and changing the, the boundaries for that purpose, which would solve the problem of the larger landowners who may want to do something, and again, I know there are people in town who do, is to establish a rural overlay district, which I described as best I could in terms of what was going on in my head. Obviously, this is just proposed language. It's just my thoughts. Any parcel of land of at least 10 contiguous acres in R1, R2, or R3 shall be in a rural overlay district automatically. You don't have to request it, you just are. The rural overlay district allows additional permitted and conditional uses beyond those in the base district. And what I put in as additional uses, I just put in as examples, which is why it's in italics. But for example, if you have 50 acres in R1, you're currently limited to less than 5 animal units. But there's no reason you should be. So they could easily be allowed to have more than 5 animal units. If you've got 50 acres, 60 acres, you can run a full-fledged farm, no problem. You're not going to interfere with anybody. Some of the other, campground, farm, retail, golf course, a lot of these things, like mineral extraction. Obviously, if you have no minerals to extract, you're not going to do that particular activity. And if you have 10 acres, you might be way too close to your neighbors, so that would not be an appropriate use for that 10 acres. But if you have 100 acres, it might be. If at any time the parcel is divided in such a way so that all or part of it is below the 10-acre minimum, that parcel or portion of it no longer falls under the rural overlay district designation. In that case, any uses allowed under that designation must immediately, and by immediately maybe a 6-month transition time, so you can close it down, be discontinued, regardless of how long those uses were in place. And I put together 4 examples so it would be clear what my thinking was. This is obviously going to take a lot of thrashing around and discussion, but I think we could potentially give a lot of folks in town more options. Many of those people might not take advantage of those options.
So basically, Donna, what you're saying is if I own 2 acres of land and I'm adjacent to a 50-acre parcel, and the guy with the 50-acre parcel wants to start doing mineral extraction right next door to me, he can start blasting away and mining or doing whatever he has to do in his mineral extraction process. And the fact that I am right next door doesn't make a bit of difference to me.
2 responses to that. First of all, that would require, well, it would be a conditional use. It would have to go through the planning board. We're also required that the planning board agree that that's one of the appropriate conditional uses for this, which they might not. Second, that's no different than right now if you live in R4. Because all of these things that I've listed, if you look at the first handout, are conditional in R4. So the only difference, in R4, your minimum acreage is 3, but you can still do all of those things. So I guess my thinking was, if you can do it on 3 acres in R4, why can't you do it on 50 acres in R2? Now, do I necessarily think mineral extraction is a good thing for the middle of a residential neighborhood? No. But I put it on the list because it was one of those conditional things. Golf course, not so much of a problem, perhaps. And if you look at the map, and that was one of the reasons that I did that, and I also have this, gosh, good. These are all the individual tax maps, color coded. A lot of large parcels are adjacent to each other. So, well, take this, pass it down and be entertaining. The intent of my thinking is not to create a hardship for anyone, but to allow large landowners who are, basically they got trapped when that map was drawn, because no thought was given to the fact that they were a large parcel in a 1 or 2 acre zone. And I think perhaps in some cases, some relief would be appropriate for those folks.
I just don't, I think I kind of tend to agree a little bit, because I think when we lumped them, I know I had concern, like we were lumping the west property, Bert Congo's property in 1 acre zones. You're saying that you're taking huge parcels, and, you could have a developer going in there and putting all these house lots in there. And this government, would give them an incentive to stay as a larger landowner than to have the incentive of splitting.
Well, we disincented them from
Right.
keeping it.
Yeah.
Because we made it so that even though they own 50 acres, and I'm sorry, we're a rural community, we're farming, agriculture, tree growth, mostly community. But what happened with some of this is that we actually made it so people can't have their llamas, or they can have the llamas, but they can't sell stuff. Or in some areas, they can't have their cattle. And to me, that doesn't make sense. You have a 50-acre parcel, but you can't have more than 5 animals. That doesn't even make any sense.
Well, don't confuse 5 animals with animal units. I love the animal unit concept. An animal unit is 1,000 pounds. So that's either 5 cows or a heck of a lot of chickens. But nonetheless,
regardless, it does limit.
If you have all those acres, you can legitimately raise more than 5 cows.
So if somebody wanted to come in, and this is how I look at it, if somebody wanted to come in and buy one of these big pieces of property in an R1 or an R2, they come in and they go, oh, we'd like to farm. But then you find out you can't. Even though it's 50 acres, you can't. And to
Well,
me,
you can still farm.
Yeah.
Well, just not critters.
Farm. The issue is animal husbandry, that's the issue,
Yeah.
it's not farming. Farming is permitted in the district. And I think the thing we have to remember is the residential 1 district was intended to be a high-density district. That's why they made it 1 acre, not to penalize anybody. Most people would consider that to be a benefit, because there's more, it's intended to be a residential area in the future. Maybe not now, but as this town continues to suburbanize, which it is, and it will in the future, unless the town's goal, this board's goal, is to put the brakes on residential development by being very aggressive in rural conservation and rural preservation. The intent is that eventually this will be a
However,
high-density residential district, and it already is.
this rural overlay district does not interfere with that at all, because it is a I hesitate to use the word temporary, but I'm going to, because I can't think of a better one. It's a temporary designation. So if let's take Diane's example. Somebody comes to town, buys a 50-acre plot. They would like to indulge in animal husbandry and raise some beef cattle. They, under this proposal, will be free to do that. 20 years from now, they become elderly and infirm and can't handle those cattle, and they decide they're going to sell it off as 1-acre house lots. They can do that. This doesn't stop it. All it does is pull it out of the rural overlay district, because now it's a series of 1-acre house lots. So this doesn't interfere with the original intent of that concentration of residential dwellings in certain areas of town. What it does is it gives people who have the larger lots the advantage of doing at least one more thing than they can do now. So if we look at that list of possible uses, even if all we did was add the animal husbandry piece, and none of the other stuff, that would be a step in the right direction in terms of freeing these people up to do more of what they might want to do. Now again, maybe there's all the 3 people who take advantage of that, but that still generates extra revenue for the town, as opposed to having the land lie idle, or having fewer animals being raised. The more animals they raise, the bigger their operation, the more taxes they're going to ultimately pay. So I don't see this as a lose situation for the town in any way, because it's not a permanent change of the definition of the use of the land. it simply gives the owners more options for as long as they choose to use it.
To Chad's point, though, I mean, when we did this originally, the 1 acre was to encourage growth. I don't know whether that works from a planning standpoint, and people will argue about that, but it was encourage growth here because we didn't want people building out where I live, you know, services, all that type of stuff, too far away. We wanted the growth here. That's why we wanted to incentivize growth there rather than in the R4 districts. One of the problems I have with doing this, and I understand the large lots of it, but when people buy houses in districts and rely upon residential uses being the primary use in that district, and all of a sudden somebody puts in, has 50 acres and then decides, maybe it's farming, maybe it's something else, John was pointing out, that changes the character, I think, of the neighborhood at that point in time. This was supposed to be neighborhoods in this area.
I understand.
And I think if you just have these pockmarks of you know, large tracts, you know, somebody decides, you know, I spent nuclear rod facility, you know, here because, you know, I got a large plot of land, but the jungle gym for my neighbor is right there.
That's under the control of the planning board in terms of what they have as permitted uses. So if the planning board says the only thing we're going to allow in those large parcels.
Well, the planning board is going to, the town is going to decide that. The planning board is going to come with.
The planning board has to come
right,
up with a recommendation, yes. I don't think making that
I know.
but that's okay.
Yeah.
So if we make a recommendation to the planning board, we'd like to see these possibilities. And the planning board says, well, you know, mineral extraction is out and sawmill is out because they make noise and it's a residential neighborhood. But, you know, animal husbandry and campgrounds, they sound reasonable. And that goes before the townspeople have no problem with it. It's a workable idea.
That's fine. I mean, they have no problem with this.
Well.
Now they do.
Well,
Okay.
And that brings me to my second point about what you said regarding this particular plan. Where do you live? R4?
That's not even on the map.
I know, R4. You're around that.
That's right.
But you live in a fairly densely populated development there. Quite a few houses altogether, correct?
Yeah, they all got sitting on 10 acres.
Okay, well, it's not too bad.
Yeah.
But still, that development went in R4,
Yep.
not R1 or R2.
Right.
Okay, I guess I would contend that since this was put into place in 2000 whatever, it hasn't worked.
Yeah.
It hasn't done what, well, A, it hasn't done what we would have anticipated that it would, and B, the only reason this was done the way it was done, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Redway, was because the state said we had to, not because it was a good idea.
Yeah, that's what it
Well, the
was.
state said you have to identify growth areas.
Right, that's all they said.
Yes.
We identified.
But, you know, frankly speaking,
Yeah,
that's what-
identify all of them.
If we look at the R1 district here, I mean, this is probably one of the highest density areas here.
Right.
And that's the R1 that ran along New Road there. So, I mean, we have concentrated growth there. We wanted to,
And
but
Campground.
guess what? It worked.
And Campground Road,
And Campground Road, yeah.
but Limerick Road and that, I think is,
I think that's a bunch of the landowners there. They had no interest in
Right.
developing their land.
right.
Part of it's land,
Right,
the
but
second
we-
one, the second element, you
But
always have to remember,
unfortunately-
is site constraints.
But it's true, unfortunately though, you
Lot
look
of
at the
sites.
developments, and this song is developing off of the old Alfred Road in a big parcel of land. Fairway Drive was a big parcel of land from Mr. Boucher. Timber Ridge, you know, all of those developments all went into R4 districts because they were clustered.
Mhm.
You know, so it's true that the biggest part of clustered developments have been in the R4 district, you know, as far as the developments, I think, recently.
And I think it's because they like the fact that they've got more acreage, and even though they're clustered, they're in a,
They're not all on top of
There's
each
a-
other, there's still.
exactly. And I'm sorry, but a lot of people, if they want to be on top of each other, they're gonna go move to Portland. Then,
I
Well,
think that's a bit of a reach.
There is some middle ground there.
Yeah,
I agree with
yeah.
that.
But what I'm saying is-
Different Saco.
when I went to these initial meetings when we were discussing this, there was a very big push because we hadn't isolated these growth areas. We didn't have growth areas. Everything at that time, I believe, was 3 acres.
Two. Whole town was two.
2 acres, yeah.
But
Good
everything,
neighbors there.
right, everyone was the same. So R4 went up to 3, and R1, R2 went down to
One, or just R1.
But at the same time, I'm gonna go back to the fact that these people own this property, but we limited even what they can do on a larger parcel.
Right, because they were arbitrarily drawn into that block.
Right. Now, you asked a question, Tad, about the fact, do we wanna limit growth? I just left the school meeting on the cost of renovating this school.
Yes, we want to limit.
Yes. I'm sorry, but houses, I'm going to say it, I'm going to be public about it, and this is how I feel about it, and I have a kid in the school. Houses with a lot of kids do not pay enough tax money to be able to support.
Right.
So, why are we not encouraging people to leave their big lots and encouraging business uses?
Which is kind of where we started. And another reason that I think this is a viable idea to at least give a good thorough airing to is because it does just that. And we've concentrated some areas where we would like to see business develop. And in that discussion, the constant theme was reduce the residential tax base and increase the business tax base. Well, the only way you're going to reduce the residential tax base is to reduce the requirements, the impact that the residents have on town. One of those is have fewer residences. Now, that doesn't mean we don't want people to move into town. It's a lovely place. I moved into town. Nobody's offered to throw me out yet. It's a matter of time. But at the same time, if we can do things to encourage, as Diane just said, there's larger landowners to make better use of their land and keep it open longer. All of you are at a disadvantage because you have not spent months thinking about this, and I have, I'm trying desperately to come up with a strong negative. I can't. Going back just to R1 North, if you look at that on the table, there are only 4 parcels that are 10 acres and more, and there are 3 of them that 10 to 19 acres. We could easily up the acreage to 20 acres as a minimum, and get rid of those 3 parcels and 2 more in R South. We get rid of 33 parcels right there if the impact on the neighbors hinges on larger parcels.
I think what would make it infinitely easier to try to comprehend this whole thing would be if we had a map about that size with color-coded acreages of 50 acres or more, 40 acres to 50
Actually, that
acres.
is
It
color
already
coded.
is, it's got little stickies on it.
What are these
the ones that
stickies
are-
for?
And they're color
The
coded
yellow,
by the
all right,
size.
blue is 10 to 19 acres, yellow is 20 to 29 acres.
When I reinterpret what 9.2, RQ 9.2 does different than 9 in the query section, tried to do that tonight, but I didn't set the query. So when I sit down and translate that more, then we'll produce that map. In the meantime, we've got stickies, but we'll produce that map that shows that.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying, but what I'm saying is it's awfully hard to comprehend where the big lots are by a little stick. What I'm saying is what you need to really get a good comprehensive view of what the situation is to have the whole lot color-coded. If there is a 50-acre lot in there, it should be color-coded red throughout the whole thing. So you can look at it and see where the big red areas are for the 50-acre lots.
I don't argue with you at all. However, my technology is very limited.
And that doesn't give you the whole story. I mean, that may be a 10-acre, like some of those may be a 10-acre lot, but that's it.
Oh, 2 acres are better developable.
Right,
Well,
or
right.
it doesn't have the correct right-of-way, case in
It's
point.
in line.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, this is, I go back to one of my previous statements. This is intended as the introduction of a concept. Tons of details. I mean, there's one large lot in our little orange thing that sticks out in the bottom of the map. It's kind of in the center, but at the very bottom. It's 50 acres, but it's swamp.
By where the
Well,
river
those
winds
all-
area.
Yeah, nothing's gonna happen there.
Yeah, right.
But,
Oh,
you know,
unless they wanna grow cranberries.
well, but that, they can already do that, that's agriculture. So a lot of these lots, quite frankly, would be completely inappropriate for anything different than they're being used for at the moment. But I guess I don't see that necessarily at this point in the discussion, certainly, maybe never is our job to make that decision. All I'm looking for is some relief for people in town who do have larger lots that could accommodate additional uses without negatively impacting their neighbors, and at the same time being a positive step for the town and the landowner.
I mean, my put is, it's a residential area, it should stay a residential. You know,
And I think we should give them an opportunity to earn money so that they might be able to hold on to it longer.
Yeah, but that disregards the view of everybody else in the residential area, Diana. I kind of agree with Dan here.
But you wouldn't know that unless you had a hearing.
People have built houses in a residential area, fully expecting it to be a residential area. And because one guy owns, let's say, 25 acres in the middle of it, I don't think you can just disregard what developing that one property does to everybody else who has built a house in the area.
It's hard to say though, some of the things that are allowed right now, like, you know, I mean, my neighbor is quiet and everything, but he's got an oil business in a residential area. What are the implications if he has an oil leak? My well, you know, and that's allowed. That's, yeah, allowed, but those things are allowed currently, you know, and, well, you know, so, you know, that's the thing, what kind of businesses do we want side by side?
I think for the agricultural side, what you're talking about, agriculture and certain types of land and husbandry, you know, an overlay district's the only way to go.
Yeah, and I agree.
why does it have to be an overlay district? Why can't you, you're gonna be splitting the ordinance up into individual packets, basically, for each district, right? Why can't it be defined in that? Yeah, I don't like overlay districts.
In your list of uses, I mean, why can't you just asterisk, so to speak, say, in excess of 10, 15, whatever the designations are,
Right.
here are additional uses that we permit. I mean, it seems to me you could do that, but that gets down to what are you going to
Well,
allow?
if you look at the farm retail, that's why I brought it up, it starts getting complex, the farm retail and the contractor storage yard, which are basically what one would call rural uses. Guys who do contracting in a rural area usually keep their equipment at home. People who do animal husbandry, you have a dairy farm or a llama farm, usually they have it right next to their house, and often it's in a residential neighborhood. If you look at that, you'll see the planning board grappled with that whole concept for months.
I mean, I don't
Almost
want
a
a bunch
year.
of contractors starting up
I know.
vehicles in my
Exactly.
door
That
at
that
5
was
o'clock
the-
in the
that was
morning.
part of the
Yeah.
issue.
We've
So
had
that's why an
complaints about that.
overlay district where you meet these certain requirements, you can get it.
Well, you can just ask her and say, if it's a conditional use or whatever, don't permit that in R1s, R2s. I mean, it's as simple as that. I mean,
That's what we
make
had to
specific
do.
designations. You can do this if your acreage is in excess of, rather than overlay. Not to-
Well,
It's just
if
another
that-
way to do it. I
If
mean,
that's a more elegant solution, that's fine.
Yeah.
I'm
I'm struggling with,
I mean,
yeah. I mean,
and
if you have
John's
animal
point about whether,
husbandry, and you're gonna have in the ordinance, you're gonna have a definition section, right? And then in each, you know, R4, R2, you know, BI, R2, you're not gonna redo, are you putting, I can't remember now, but are there definitions in those sections also? So in that section, R2 should be animal husbandry, and this is what's allowed. R1, and whatever it is, and then it should state 10 acres or more, rather than putting an overlay. To me, that's just much,
No, and I
so
can-
much
I can
cleaner
live
to
with
do that.
Yeah, I can live with that.
but I mean, it still gets back, I think, Tad's original point about what exactly are we envisioning for these districts in the first place? Is it residential, like Dan is saying, stick with that, because that's,
Is it mixed use?
or the mixed
What is
use,
it?
or, I mean, even if it's animal husbandry, you know, if somebody gets a good-looking pig farm out there and the odors start wafting on certain days, people and residences are gonna complain. And rightfully so. I didn't move in here to smell nature.
Well, I mean, you know.
I mean, it happens by right to farm.
I understand.
What happens when Du Bois fertilizes his farm?
Right.
There are people on this board that bitch like crazy, and it's allowed use. It's all, you know.
Well, that's a
Yeah,
whole
we're gonna
different
tread
argument
there.
about where do you choose to live and
Right.
why did you make that choice?
Right.
All right, I would also, in the defense of pigs, tell you that
I don't think it's fit.
at this point, with the animal husbandry regulation as it is in R1, R2, R2, R3, you can have, let's see, average pig, 10 pigs. I can make 10 pigs smell more than 100 if I don't manage it properly. And I can prove that. So,
I'll take your word for it.
I'm so
Please
glad.
don't show it.
So glad. But so it's sometimes it's not what you do, it's how you do it.
But that's-
So if
but-
you are unfortunate enough to be next to a bad neighbor following the
That's
current
right.
rules, you are more up a creek than if you were next to a good neighbor following less stringent rules perhaps. So that's a crapshoot, no pun intended.
But my bad neighbor, who's got 50 pigs, or 100 pigs, or 150 pigs.
Is probably in violation of some ordinance.
I don't know. I don't know what. We don't have a smell ordinance, I don't think.
Oh, that's a whole different problem.
I think in the areas that we've designated as growth, which is R1, those are the areas that this town has designated as the growth areas, and
It doesn't-
somewhat it follows that pattern to some degree. I think
See,
those should be left alone.
I've always had an issue with this whole area. I don't mind campground road, but I mean, you're talking like the Swecker property is what, 70 acres, I think it is?
I hate to tell you, but I didn't memorize this.
You know?
Yeah, it's about something.
It's
But
about
it's
70
in
something
the packet.
acres, and you've got some number of Cow Hill, you've got all of
Yeah.
this. To me, this whole section should go at least back to, at least our
That should be
four, really, you know.
And you've got
But,
what,
you know,
one?
I mean, I can see growth in this area here and that,
But
but.
why, Simon, why?
because-
What if that guy wants to hold on to that piece of property and his plan is to hold on to that, give it to his kids, and maybe down the
Right.
road they're gonna develop that?
But remember, we did just the opposite to them when we decided to make it R1. When we took away their rights to be able to do certain things that they were able to do
Because I
before.
used to have a big horse farm and stuff, but I just think that all of these, most of these parcels, maybe this end is developed, but these,
But you know something, for some of
Even
us,
2 acres,
I don't
just
know.
double.
for some of us, trading off our rights to do what we want to do with our property for being able to sell it off to make money off it is not why we own it.
I understand that. Some people do.
Right.
If you're gonna take that right away from those people.
And, I mean, people may not want to sell it, maybe they want to keep 70 acres of one house.
If we go back to that section that Simone was just looking at, count the little tags that overlap between the yellow and the green. There's a blue tag, so that's 10 to 19 acres. There are 2 orange tags, which is 20 to 29 acres, and there are 2 red tags, which means it's over 50 acres.
But
So
you can
that's,
fix that. I
that's-
mean, you can just move the lines.
that's 5 people we could call in and say, what do you want to do? You want all of your, because they're all split lots. Do you want to stay in R1, R4? You know, do you want to be in R1 and have 1 acre lot possibilities, or do you want to be in R4? Those are easy. Anybody who's trapped in the middle, and there are, you know, a few, and again, maybe nobody cares. I may be the only one who does, but I'd like to explore the option.
There are other ways
Just
to
for-
deal with that too, in terms of giving, even though the lot's split, there are ordinances that provide that you get an option to choose the zone that you want to be in. Using the less restricted zone is your option. Or within certain distances,
I
you
think
can
that's
do
what she
that.
was suggesting.
Yeah, that's.
I thought you were moving the line,
No.
like Simone was.
Well, hold
You
on,
can do
hold
that.
on just a second. Was I correct in my memory that the planning board wanted to follow lot lines instead of these arbitrary straight
They have
lines?
conceded that that's a good idea.
Okay,
Well,
so if
one of the
we,
reasons why we see it there, by the way, that's one place where it's not really arbitrary, just, and I hate to use this as an example, because in most other places, it is arbitrary. But one of the reasons why I don't believe it is as arbitrary is because there's a soil line in through here. And that soil line, we go from a Croton soil, which you can get a septic system on,
No,
to
there
a
wasn't any of the
non-brick soil.
discussion.
Well, right about in here I would say right about, in line goes something like that, is where there is a major shift in soils. And then, because we investigated when we were doing the town hall stuff. The
Right.
change is dramatic.
And
And
that
what
may
it
be
is,
true, but that
it's
wasn't discussed when
repairing
they were
it.
discussing that zone.
But you got shoreline there too.
You got shoreline and you got.
250 kind of right off the river.
Yeah.
I mean, I think there's some consideration in that, we'd love to build closer to the road, stay away from shoreline.
When was that changed over to R1?
Probably in 2005.
But
No, it was before that.
Was it 95?
2002.
Yeah, it was
95.
95. That goes back.
Goes
to-
back.
That goes back that far?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Wow. No, I didn't know that.
yeah, and
Yep.
the major ordinance
Right.
revisions, yeah.
But,
Well, that figures, because that's when OCP's didn't, was really big on the growth areas and
Yeah.
conservation areas.
And if you do have a bigger lot, you know, 20 to 29 or 30 to 50, I mean, that's a pretty good size lot. You're gonna have to do something pretty disruptive for your neighbors to know you're doing.
Not necessarily that, but what if your only usable piece is right in some corner of that, the rest of it's dark,
Well,
it's all swamp. I got an acre right here, I can do something with.
if you're taking into account the planning board's piece of it with regards to setback and buffering,
Yeah.
so, all right,
That's
now
a good built
you've
in.
got your 50-acre piece, and you go to the planning board and you say, okay, I want to put my nuclear power plant, go back to yours. I want to put my nuclear power plant in this corner, right next to Jim's house.
Yeah.
I'm gonna bet the planning board's gonna deny that application. I have faith in it.
Not unless they've got a standard.
They're gonna have something to tell
Conditional
them tonight.
use, you know, as well as any, that's,
But that's why the
You don't
planning
put it as a
board puts
permitted use.
together the appropriate setbacks and buffers.
she's talking about conditional use.
Yeah,
Conditional's permitted with conditions.
right, so the conditions have to be appropriate,
Yeah.
and these are, what we're talking about are all conditional uses here. So if we do our job correctly, and then the planning board does its job correctly, I don't see, you know, you're always gonna have somebody complains about something, which is why we're here. But nonetheless, I think it's potentially workable, and again, as far as I'm concerned, if there's one person in town who, if we did this, came forward and said, thank you, I can now do what I've always wanted to do with my land, I would consider that a job well done.
What's the name of the next one, bitches about?
And we call the people all the time. However, the other little piece that I thought about, because I kind of knew that point would come up, and it's not an invalid point. But if you look at R4, which is rural conservation, the minimum acreage is 3 acres. And you're allowed to do all of these things. Now, that's not much different than 2 acres and being allowed to do some of these things.
And I don't have big farms or all those things all over my house.
So,
Why did we get down to 3? I don't remember that. It was 5.
because nobody would vote for 5,
Five
they thought it was
acres,
too
yeah.
restrictive.
I thought we did have 5, and then
We
We
tried
did,
five.
I think we did.
didn't we?
The original one that went to vote had 5.
Right.
We tried 5.
That's
Sank like a stone.
Yeah, it was
For
1, 3, it was
R4.
1, 3, and 5, and we had to go back after they said to take it and shove
I
it.
think it didn't pass, and then we decreased it to.
So if you really want to do rural conservation, you have to do large lots. And 5 lots, 5 acres isn't even enough.
Well, I was
Auburn
pushing,
has 10 acres in there.
Actually, I think that since our number of houses built has decreased, I think we should go back and do what the state told us to do and recalculate the number of permits that we should give out and decrease them now.
I think we still have that.
It's an inverse
We
relationship.
we still have, we give out, like, we keep.
Right, but we had to go back and up the number of houses permits that we could give out.
It's 30, is it 30?
I think it's up to 42.
42.
Yeah.
but yeah.
But we had to up it because the state said, oh no, because you've had all this growth, you have to up it. Well, now that we haven't had any of this growth, I think we should go back and recalculate it and bring it back
Actually,
down.
I recall a meeting where that was discussed.
The planning board has talked about that.
And we said,
When I was on the planning board.
Right.
Yeah.
I think I remember that meeting,
Yeah.
and they said, yes.
Because I was always one to reduce the
If
permits.
it ever, right, if it ever goes backwards, we should reduce the permit,
Yes.
so, yes.
I've said that.
Put it on the planning board's agenda, I'm sure they love that.
Are they the one that said?
Well, doesn't the state mandate we do it, wasn't it, we have to do it every 5 years? Wasn't there something that was supposed to do it every 5 years?
Yeah.
Due
No,
for
it's
next year.
up at town.
So we're due to do it for next year anyway, so put it on the list.
Yeah, I remember.
So it's,
The main
but it's
thing that I've
a
never
temporary
done on the
solution.
planning board.
It doesn't solve the problem. If you want a permanent solution to the problem, this is where we've got to come up with it. The growth control measures are nothing more than really, they just postpone the problem in the real estate process. So for the existing landowner, it's wonderful, but for the person looking for affordable first-time homes, it's terrible. But it increases valuation. So if the intent of the town is to increase valuation, residential valuation, it's wonderful. Multi-edged sword.
Yes.
That means we'll tax you.
You want the taxes go up at the same time?
Yeah, that's the problem. Or actually, what happens is usually is mill rate goes down, as valuation goes up, it's kind of important.
Last time I drove here, that's what that was, 2000.
2000.
Yeah, we have it right here.
No, because I did it in 2010.
Is that when it went to fully summer before set aside?
We kept it the same. You know, we kept it the same. That was an 8, because I was here.
Well, I like the idea of having like a chart, have this many acres.
Well, I think it goes back to what you want to do.
The language here,
Right.
we need to deal with, it's not
Yes.
gonna be anywhere near that detail, but it would suggest that, I think what you're suggesting is that larger lots ought to be accommodated with some additional use.
Kind of where I was going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With some little
Yeah.
parameters that, find some way to limit the impact to
Right. Appropriate
neighboring
buffering and
residential.
conditionally, I mean,
And just like we did with the agricultural processing administration facility, that's the time when we should have joint meetings, so we say, okay, this is what we're proposing, and do the back and forth with the planning board, so they're clear on what our intent was, so they can back it up with the appropriate rules and regulations, if we get that far. So,
I know that this is already the agenda, but I think it might be conducive for us to have this discussion with the planning before we go much farther with this, to see where it's at. I mean, they got finished up some stuff already. Do they want to take on, and they'll have to take it on, but I'd like to know what their thoughts are about.
Well, as they're rewriting the land use, they
Yeah.
can incorporate this.
We've got to get to that point where we get this ordinance under control.
Right.
Rather than have a list of amendments that are just.
Right. And the planning board's been informed that they need to, at the next meeting here, they need to participate, they need to be participants in this process, because I think we probably had a little disconnect when we had that density issue in DB1 and DB2, and that threw a real curveball. We should be thinking about that all along.
yeah.
But it helps when you have the conceptual and then the minutia. And the planning board deals with a lot of this details. The two should work together.
So we discussion on that Thursday night.
Yeah, I heard that. I was. So they agree that they have to do that, right?
Am I correct in the first thing the planning board needs to do is straighten out the DB1, DB2, all the stuff that didn't go to town meeting? They need to
Plus
finish.
the other two districts.
Yeah, they need to finish that first,
Yeah.
so the business districts can get up and running and do what they need to do. So I'm gonna guess we are months away from troubling them with anything new that we come up with.
They gotta finish, they gotta fix the Fritz issue, they gotta fix the issue with the seasonal cottages. Those are the must, I mean, that's a pretty
A
quick
lot of
one.
small stuff.
Yeah.
But that's stuff that has to get done
Okay.
first.
So we basically want to stay out of their way until they take care of that.
But let them still participate in this, because the rural, the residential section, if you really look at it, talking the residential sections of the ordinance and the rural, whatever we do with rural conservation, that's the majority of the land. Business districts are small in
Yeah.
comparison to simply BI.
Well, is the plan that they're going to attend our meetings?
Yes.
Okay. That's like a little easier.
Yeah, it's not something you have to go to them, they should come and participate in this, and hear what the visioning of this board is, and then their advice or their considerations to your contemplations. What do we want the rural, residential and rural parts of this town to look like? What's the policy that we're gonna pursue? And that's what you're doing, you're looking at, what's the policy that we're gonna use for the majority of the town, essentially, the majority
Well,
of the
yeah,
land area in the
in a
town.
big way,
Mhm.
yeah. 5%.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, then, now we're perhaps done working backwards. Well, I wanted to throw this out, because this is complicated and requires thought. So now that you have that to mull over at 2 in the morning, then I guess the next thing you need to do is go back to square one here, look at this language, kind of keep that idea in the back of our minds, and see if we're happy with this language and what's reflected on the map, and if not, what do we want to do? So,
So Donna, what you've got here is you've just taken these out, just cut and pasted of what's there today.
yeah, so you're going to keep flipping back and forth between
Yep.
section B and C. And I guess as we're doing this, as we look at each district, kind of keep in mind what it is that the planning board currently permits and as conditional uses. Because again, we might want to make some recommendations to either add something or delete something, because since that particular district has either developed more or maybe not, what made sense a while back may not make sense anymore. So, R1. Something like that?
No, thanks.
Good?
I want to lose you now.
Thanks, Doug.
Maybe later.
Maybe later. Leaving the options open.
After 9.
High density is possible if you only have plus 55.
Well, actually, that was something I wanted to bring up. That might be an appropriate use to add to some of these larger lots in R1, R2, and R3.
The only constraint in that is septic.
Yeah.
Having suitable soil for septic purposes. That's about it. And water, not running into the low saltwater rises.
Yeah.
That's the only real controlling factor. But that's a positive, what you're talking about, then, that's the positive cash flow that the town needs to get out of school. And there's a paucity of over 55 or age-restricted communities in southern Maine. You can't find it, they don't have it.
Condos, things like that.
Condos, but it's not an it's not a 55 and older community. They're very big elsewhere in the country. I mean, Florida's covered one, but Carolinas are covered one. Connecticut's got them. Massachusetts got them. But we have the closest one's Highlands. That I know.
It's just off of Catamount Road.
Is it age restricted or is it?
That's all modular, that's all mobile,
Yeah.
double wide.
Condos.
Oh, it's condo, oh, the
So
condo.
I lived
Oh,
on
yes, the
that and I used
condos.
to
The
hear
condos,
them
yeah.
bring buildings on crap all the time. But it was age restricted, but as far as I understood.
Yeah, they have two, they have the condo, I know which one you're talking about, they have the condo and then they have, double wides.
Louis is trying to get something.
Right,
Right.
right. He's got the age restriction part on it.
Right, he does.
Yeah.
Well, we would want to have something that appreciates the value. That's one of the problems with the mobile homes is, as you know, they depreciate instead of appreciate.
You can double wide.
Double wide.
It's not as, you know,
Yeah, most of them are having garage.
Right.
Yeah, no, he's adding value, they're value added.
And the double wides now that they're doing are not like the old, the mobile wides now are all, most of them, because I'm talking to the woman that put my house in, but a lot of them they're putting in sheetrock now. They're not doing that rubber board and paneling and stuff anymore, they're actually putting sheetrock and stuff now.
Well, what you could see them start to do would be to take the seasonal cottage concept, add a garage to it, and that would meet that age group, that demographic standard, in other words. But that same kind of, with a little better design, obviously, proper than wells, but there are.
The golf course is important, right?
Yeah.
That's another area that I'm sure they'll see.
That's another split lot.
But I can see development along those lines in that.
They came in one time to develop that for 55 and inside.
Yeah, but that,
Yeah, it was here
that
for-
one went to way extremes, because that was like a lot of condo.
It's not a big-
Do 75 hours, you want to do 75?
Too much snake oil.
Yeah.
But, you know, if you look at the map, when you're talking about that type of community, I mean, I think the greatest opportunity for that is, you know, R2. I mean, I don't see opportunity for that in the R1 area.
Not R1
No.
North, R1 South maybe.
Maybe, but it's very,
Our one's cut down.
yeah.
Our one at the top is our one down the bottom.
No, it isn't, but you're right, along Campground Road, you get a nice lens of Adams soil, and it's good soil. It can take that density. You start getting down along Limerick Road, on the west side of Limerick Road, it starts getting squirrely, the soil is there.
Wonder when it's squirrely.
That's a technical term.
It's a clay everywhere.
It's close.
When you look
Well,
at
it's
the R2
not-
north, I mean, there's all land through something like that.
It's a lot of-
Well, what kind of acreage is required for such a housing, 55 and older housing, age restricted housing?
Anyway, obviously, the more acreage, the more impact it has. You have more than 10 units.
Give me a ballpark minimum.
10?
6.
Huh?
6.
60?
As I say, it's hard to say, like, I know my friend's mother lives in Massachusetts, and there's a cornfield on the other side of her, but basically they're like, there are 3 units together. Is it 3? 2 or 3 together. They're little, they basically 1 and 2 bedrooms with a garage in the middle of them both, porches and everything, and then there's the big house, which is more assisted living, but there's like, I can't remember how many, you loop around and it's like, their own private roads, their own sidewalks, people can walk all around and stuff, and I'd say, I'll have to find out, but I would say it must be close to 50, if not more units.
But I'm not sure you'd want to make a minimum of 60 acres.
Oh, no, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that's usually the optimal size.
That's
Yeah,
it.
because you want facilities, I mean, you want
You want facilities, that's what
pool,
sells.
you want tennis, you want places.
Without it being jammed in,
Right,
like
you
it.
just can't stay there.
Well, unless you're talking assisted living. If you're talking assisted, many of the assisted livings they just have a room. They don't have, I mean, they have like a room like this where everybody eats and they play
Right.
games and stuff like that, but they don't have pools and tennis courts.
And that's not residential as much as it's.
That's what I said, it's assisted
Congregate
living.
care facility.
Right.
Yeah.
But like Kensington.
And I'm not sure that some of these areas that have the acreage to support it allow that.
And in the new ordinance, you've got congregate care in there, and they need to be close, they have a tendency also.
No, I'm saying in the residential areas. In some of these residential areas,
Yeah.
like the R4 that's split between R4 and R1 along the water, okay? Along Limerick Road.
West of the Limerick Road, where's some other point to be called.
Right. So say, for example, somebody did want to take a big lot. and make an assisted living. Would that be allowed there today? I don't think so.
No.
No, it's not permitted at this point.
And this is where, because that pays much bigger taxes, but they don't utilize, I hope not utilizing the school.
Well, but they may
They rescue.
overutilize some of the services, you know.
Right,
I mean, there's some trade, not as much as obviously
Right.
70 kids.
Right.
but it,
And almost all of them have restrictions about kids. You can have them visit, but you can't have them stay.
Yes, that-
And there's been court cases that have upheld it.
Yeah, I mean, 55 and older, I don't know if any of 55 and older are allowed to kids, but.
Well, you can have kids, there's a difference. Congregate care, what you're talking about, is different than an age-restricted community because there's no medical facilities provided. It's basically housing, it's country club housing for over 55s. And you can have kids that are over 18 years old living there, ironically, outside of school age.
Yes.
But that's a federally recognized, that's in the Fair Housing Act of 78.
Yeah. I think they have to be over the age of 18.
18.
But on almost all of them, you'll find that the deeds say on them, for children under the age of 18, they're limited in visitation.
Right, how many months they can be there. Yeah, that's in most of the condo docs. So we're talking about two different animals that are both dealing with the same demographic age group in different health conditions, obviously. Both situations where it usually results in a positive cash flow for the town. And one that has probably more impact on ambulance service. So you know that Medicare does not provide full reimbursement. So. But those are the only limitation to that.
School.
Yeah. Well, yeah, ambulance at, let's say a $300 loss or $200 loss around is a lot better than $10,000.
So the daycare home is currently conditional in R1, R2, R3. And I realize it's a different animal still, but if we're going to concentrate growth in R1, R2 in particular, it seems to me that both of those would be good additions. The age-restricted community and the congregate care facility.
Yeah.
It would make sense.
Yes, it would, because they're dense. The one limitation that you would want is, that occurs is again septic, because it's concentrated development. If we proceed, not to make the pitch, but I'm going to make the pitch, if we proceed with the seasonal cottage depth, assuming the CEA works out on that, and the town does agree to start looking at bringing sewer service down the Brooklyn border, pulling it up Route 1, or pulling up Limerick Road or down Campground into the higher density R1, not that much of a stretch. Provided we have the capacity. In fact, even the topos with us. Some of those.
But the units are usually smaller, because you're not building,
Water flows
so
less.
you're not, right, you're not doing 3-bedroom
Right.
units. You're usually doing 1, maybe 2.
Maybe.
Usually one bath.
Yeah, and if you're talking assisted living, that's a room, sometimes not their own bath.
Right.
So, for me, that's a good use in those quieter areas, because I don't think you're gonna be having those 55-year-olds out there hooping and hollering and riding dirt bikes and,
How many of this
I think
girl
it's
are
Simone
under
to start.
55?
I hoop and holler and.
and if they keep taking those three-wheelers and ripping up my property, I'm gonna keep hollering, all right?
Straight bullet from
So-
Tony Parks.
I guess my point with this is that there are things that we can add to those areas that we have greatly restricted,
Yes.
that are beneficial not only to the landowners, in some cases because if it works, it lowers the taxes for everybody, so it lowers the taxes for the people that live in that area. So for me, some of those things are win-win. You know, I'll agree that mineral extraction and some of those things, would work. But I think that there are some things that we can add to those to those lots that are much bigger, that works for everybody. And if we can come to a consensus of what those things are,
Well,
then it's a win-win.
I think, I agree with you completely. I think it would make sense to maybe start brainstorming some of those additions. Again, I'm almost tempted to work backwards. Goes against my brain, but if we brainstorm some of those additions and then went back and looked at the description to make sure that they would fit within the description that we have, and alter the description as needed, and that in turn gives the planning board the latitude they need to add those things to the permitted conditional uses.
Unless things have changed, you're kind of, we're gonna run into an issue for 55 and over on whether they're gonna be accepted from our growth ordinance or not.
That has to be resolved.
There's already language in there about that.
I thought there was language about that
I remember
already.
having a discussion
Yeah.
about that.
I
Look at, I haven't
think
looked at
there's a
growth.
limitation on how many they can still pull.
There was
I know
some-
Dan was trying to pull all of them at once, and that just wasn't.
Was that something we were trying to change when we did the golf course?
Yes,
Yes.
and it didn't
Yeah.
fly.
And it failed.
It didn't fly.
But that, that would have to be changed.
I don't think there's anything in there now, Tom, that allows somebody to come in with a big,
There were a limitation on units, but I mean, there was exempt from, some units were exempt from the growth rates, I read about.
Might be kind of
But
taken care of.
see,
I don't think it's huge restriction.
In a lot of places,
That.
I don't have this.
an assisted living facility is one facility.
Yeah.
It's one building.
medical facility.
I'm not talking about that, I'm talking about the 55 and
Yeah.
over communities,
You're talking
like
about-
they
Oh, okay.
wanted
Age
to do it at
restricted.
golf course.
Okay.
Yeah, if I recall, that the deal was that we had X number of permits, and because of the way it was, he didn't have to pull all the permits,
Right.
and
Which-
so that wasn't gonna be enough.
Which
to
they
make
couldn't
money.
anyways because of the way it's written, they
Right.
can't
They
pull.
can only have what,
Right.
five or something.
Yeah,
So that's something that, which, you know, I won't say my opinion, but it's something that we'll have to grapple with the planning.
So you suggesting, Donna, that we go through the ordinances right now and start thinking about other uses that might be compatible in these areas and then start backfilling against what the,
yeah,
okay.
does that make sense? to
It's fine by me,
anybody
yeah.
besides me?
Yeah.
Because if we can be creative and free up some more possibilities for those areas, then we just alter the language so that it is inclusive of those types of things.
Line developments, fixing those.
What is it?
Flying developments, where it's development that's built around a runway, and you have people that own airplanes, they have their own hangars, basically built onto their house, and they fly in, taxi over into their garage.
Well, it'd be nice if we could tie
Oh,
that
yeah.
into the Bedford Airport. All right, that's
Okay, where exactly do you live? Because I want that approach to be very close to your roof.
I don't know, they could probably glide across my first and second field up there.
So I'm not 55 and
Been there,
older.
done that. That's how the oval on the hill road had a plane briefly. And I'm
Well, the thing is, a
Not
lot
happy.
of those can be dealing with, it's nothing cheap to own an airplane. So these are people that have money, they're just like, yeah, I just like to be able to fly, but I don't want to live, in Boston. Live outside of Boston, flying in.
Driving on a motorcycle, or flying on a
I had a friend who was an architect who lived in one of those communities in Wisconsin.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I flew all over the country because he was an architect. And he loved it.
I had a friend who was a stockbroker who had a place like that in Florida, where they could fly down there in the winter. But as far as this business about flying to your job every day, believe me, there's a lot of complications. You get a lot of bad weather, you gotta have an instrument flight ticket, and it just, plus you're gonna have a help, probably would need land about half the size of a rumble, put a decent runway with good approaches and all that. So I don't know, but it's a real practical thing for us to.
Oh, I don't know, some of these runways are not that big.
Well, you asked for suggestions.
But-
I throw suggestions out, and everybody is quick to shoot all my suggestions down.
I didn't say
Amusement
nothing.
parks, no, we don't but now you're in the industrial area, that's not industrial use.
You were discussing water
See
parks
that?
on
It's-
111.
It's,
I said they belong on
It
Route.
doesn't matter. It gets shut down.
Do you have,
somebody might have.
do you have any,
Actually,
do
it
you have any
wasn't.
other good ideas that we can?
Oh, I got all kinds. Right here.
Well, I'll tell you one thing, you're onto something because we do have somebody who's looking right now at an equestrian subdivision.
Oh, really?
Yes. Who's looking at building a large stable indoor rink and a large stable facility, actually it's being built right now, and then develop land around it, subdivision where they all have rights to the stable and to the rink.
And where would they be allowed to do this?
Right on Eastern Trail.
Our board.
You'll use these.
Our-
Actually, it's gonna be an R1 next to Dan's house.
I don't know, I'm sorry, but if I was in one, I wouldn't mind having it next to my house.
Well, they're looking at that, so it's exactly what you're talking about, and that kind of thing.
Just to play devil's advocate for a moment, assuming they were not looking at R4, because I assume they already have a piece of property in mind, what would be wrong with having that in R2 or R3 on a 50-acre piece? I doubt the neighbors would know it was there.
I don't think there'd be any problem with that. But when you bring up the issue of stables, riding stables is a commercial facility, because you know, right now, we don't allow that in our zoning ordinance, and yet we have 3 in town. Possibly 4.
That's crazy.
But it's not permitted in the zoning ordinance.
How is,
It
It's not
wouldn't be not
specified.
permitted.
how is a
It's like-
riding stable any different?
Commercial. That's
What is it, what does it come under?
It's the issue of, but that's the problem. It's an animal husbandry issue, and it's also a commercial facility when the shows, and there's a lot of off-site, potential off-site impacts, if it's commercial riding stable.
Okay.
But it depends who the CEO is interpreting it at the time, because we have that kind of system. So some have been denied, some have been
I
approved.
mean, 'cause I really don't see that much as anything but animal husbandry up to a point.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
if you read the definition of animal husbandry, you'll see it's producing, it's production, animal production, and keeping and production. When you start getting into a dressage center or something like that, it's a different animal.
Well, what if
That's
you
not
were,
animal
what if you were breeding horses
Like Du Bois.
Fine.
as well?
Fine, that's
as well?
fine.
Du Bois and soccer, oh my word.
So then you have,
That's a
you're a
small
horse
farm,
breeder
that's
and
a
you have a riding stable.
You have a riding stable, but if you have dressage, you're teaching dressage, or you're training people, or you have
That's a
horseback
home
riding.
occupation.
But then it's an educational facility.
No, it's a home
It's
occupation.
not typically done by a homeowner. Besides, it's not, it can't be any larger than 500 square feet. So if you can fit your horse
It's just my
in
barn.
500 square feet,
I just have a big home.
and it's gonna be attached to the house, it's gonna have living quarters in it. It's part of the home occupation.
My barn would have to be attached to my house.
Well, they
It's
also.
the home
go for
occupation.
what they-
There's a lot of them that have apartments above it.
Can't be considered recreation.
It's not a recreation
Okay,
facility.
and see, this just tells me that some of the rules
Are silly.
are silly.
Well, no, it's just because
And it's one of the
there's a
reasons why
lack
we
of
don't attract some of
imagination
these
of
big,
them
nice-
thought of these things. That's why.
All right, well, I guess that's gonna be our job then.
Yeah, it is, and that was one of the ones I wanted to bring up. And what it is a lack of imagination, not thinking about all the things that can occur. That's all it is.
And this kind of thing, we need to find a way to put in the ordinance to allow these kinds of things.
Leisure time activities is not considered horseback riding?
Not for the horse.
Indentured servitude.
I don't know.
Now, another thing too, though, like Sean was mentioning, BI, how restrictive is that if somebody wanted to put a water park or amusement park in there? Have we gotten
Because it
into the
looks like
point
you
where it's
already
so,
got some kind of
is it
pond
so,
or something.
is it so restrictive as
No.
far as, because I mean, if we're
I
allowing seasonal cottage,
was working with a guy who wanted to put in a frisbee golf course there. I don't know what happened to him because he looked at the excavation costs.
So what would a water park come under?
Amusement, that would be probably recreation,
Yeah,
commercial recreation.
recreational, which is allowed there today.
oh, it's not.
Yeah.
That's why the guy was looking at a frisbee golf course. I've taken a guy up there, I've taken people out there, and walked that side with a mountain bike guy. He was looking at putting in a mountain bike course. Quite frankly, not a lot of return for us, because they don't build it. Same thing with the frisbee golf course. He puts up a couple of those iron nets, and that's about
No,
it.
but the equestrian thing.
The equestrian thing, I like, we'll promote it. Do like that a lot.
What about projects like the car guy that we were talking to, who wanted to put up
Same sort of thing.
he wanted to put up a facility where people could keep high-value antique cars and make sort of a club thing out of it.
And they look around, that many people want to use the facilities.
There's a
Right.
huge one in Portland, our friend owns it.
Really?
Now, can I ask a question?
Is that gonna be added on Benton's campground?
I guess one of my concerns has always been the mobile home parks on 111.
Yep.
One of them is aging and facilities as far as septic and well, have been issues ongoing on and off for years and years and years. Is the new land use ordinance, how restricted is it for mobile home parks? And it's like somebody took a 50-acre parcel and said, I want to make a new mobile home park. Is that allowed or anything in the new ordinance?
We haven't attacked that issue of a mobile home overlay district, which is how we do it right now.
Okay.
It's a very, it's a narrow band. There aren't very many areas in which the mobile home park is designated.
Because that's always,
Is it on that?
Yeah,
The-
if turn it around, you'll see the key.
because that's always a concern, because that's usually the
Yep,
number.
it is. It's basically around Campground Road, which is never gonna happen unless somebody basically mends all these tiny little parcels together. You have to do conglomeration of large parcels there.
Mhm.
You have it out on Proctor Road.
You do?
Yes, you do. And you also have it over in, well, you have it along in the CCN district up here.
Yeah, ARD.
And that's it. And frankly speaking, you probably won't limit it. The law is that you have to have some area that's designated for it by state law, but it doesn't say where, when, how, or how much.
Well, we certainly don't need more, that's because that's.
No, that's not a good,
No.
that's not a.
I mean, you're talking $200 worth of taxes and 3 kids in school.
Putting 3 kids in the school, so
Yeah.
that's the real issue. So, I've been reading, the EDC is interested in seeing mobile homes, not in town, and for that same reason.
So that's all.
It's a depreciating value instead of an appreciating value.
Just hold on there, please. Okay, so far we have age-restricted housing, congregate care facility. What else could we potentially do in R1, R2?
Stables, riding stables?
In R1, R2, R3?
Not sure about R1. Let's think, well, we have it in R1. We have a riding stable in the house, right?
Yes, we do.
Yep.
No real impact that I know of, I've got nothing on it.
Where is it?
It's on Ludwig Road. Oh, it's off Ludwig Road. I don't even know, I can't remember the name.
Staple, Mary May,
Yeah.
Mary May Farm.
Oh,
It's very small. I mean, it's not a huge facility, and they don't have dressage and huge riding.
Yeah, but if they're doing
It's not
dressage, people are not, it costs a lot of money.
That's a lot, I know. I've done it, it's what
And the horses don't usually make a lot of
I was
noise.
gonna say, we're working along.
They don't break into your houses.
As you keep them on the trail, don't let them go down the street like my neighbor.
Therapy road.
Poop in the middle of the street.
It dries out.
Oh, the other thing is therapy horses too is another big thing.
yeah.
Therapy horses.
Oh, yes, yes.
That goes along with riding stables, I think, or?
I don't know. Therapy horses, same kind.
Yes.
Pet, therapy horses, same category?
There's riding stables?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
like the one in Dayton.
Or Highland.
The one
A
right
friend
in,
who does that
at
at
Four
Highland,
Corners.
she's
Saco, 35, yeah.
I would think that would be, that would fit. You know, the issue that you're gonna run into in terms of impacts, I don't think it's gonna be so much the horses. I mean, you can control the odors, horse manure doesn't stink. Don't
No.
take, unless you don't put it next to, wood chips. But, it's gonna be traffic, that'll be, the offsite impact that people will might complain about is traffic. So the issue would be scale, and, how many horses, how many people that you have.
Well, if they also plan on having competitions there, are they gonna have to have parking?
Oh, they have to have parking. I was
Stands.
about to bring that up, because that is very popular. Shows, and they're not, it's not expensive shows, they're usually clubs where they just say, well, we'll have a show. And you won't believe how many people come to that. I've guaranteed those many times.
And
You
we
can get
may,
several hundred people coming to those.
we
and
may
that's a
have
lot of traffic.
stables allowed in the R1 zone, but I don't think we should have something like that allowed in the R1 zone, because that is a growth, or it's a residential growth. That's fine, but they don't do shows, they don't do any of that stuff there, and they shouldn't be allowed to do shows.
But it doesn't stop residential growth, because they could always sell it for residential
Might-
growth if you have.
Might that not be an ideal situation to say that for that, there has to be this minimum number of acres? So whether we did it as the overlay zone, or whether we follow Tom's, we can say, you know, you can't do that unless you're on 30 acres.
It's great for that, for that particular facility, but what about if you're in a growth area where you've got tons of residences, now you're adding all this traffic in those areas?
But isn't
The
that
facility
exactly,
may have 10 acres, but, you know, I think it should be away from the growth areas.
isn't that exactly where you want your traffic going?
Well, is it-
Limerick
I mean,
Road is
come
one
on,
of the main
Limerick Road.
traffic facilities.
You don't want to add more than what's there already today.
But that's your growth area, that's where your traffic is supposed to be.
You can't have it both ways.
Sorry, that's where your traffic is supposed to be.
Well, that's where your specification would be for it has to connect to an arterial.
Can't
It's
have it.
okay if it was on that, on delivery, but it might be a different story if it's on Elba.
You know, the town designated some growth areas, and to me, those growth areas should just be residences. We've got plenty of other stuff elsewhere, plenty of, tons and tons of land elsewhere to add a few of these other things to help cut the taxes, but you get a bunch of residences in those areas, and now you start adding all of this stuff, and you're encroaching on the residences.
But Dan, like that lower area that we designated, like on Limerick Road down there, those are all big parcels there. So just because you said you're an R1, those landowners don't necessarily want to sell, like, you know, they're keeping it together.
Very
So
true.
why aren't we allowing them to do something that they want to do in a large parcel?
We don't know what those landowners want to do with that parcel.
Well-
Right, but why are we restricting them just because we said you're an R1, so, you know, you have to take your 10 acres and sell them off and buy 10 acres someplace else because we won't let you do a riding stable on your 30-acre parcel because it's in a growth area. We called the growth area. They didn't. They had bought years before we even did it in 95.
And some of them
I understand, but
being in that growth
it
area.
is, it's what it's been designated, right? It's been designated the growth area now for how long?
That doesn't make it right.
I understand that, but there are,
But if you've owned your land since 1970 and your son is now taking over the property and wants to do a riding stable or whatever in that 30-acre parcel, why are you saying no to certain types of growth that just
Job
because
security.
we designated it that way? I don't agree. I think,
But you see, a riding stable that pays higher taxes, or a bunch of houses that uses nothing but taxes.
John
Speaking,
desperately wants to jump in.
I just wanted to say, speaking as a homeowner who lives on Limerick Road in the R1, I would have no objection to living across the street from a riding stable. I'd rather have a riding stable than 5 more houses with a lot of screaming kids and God knows what else.
We need to get you an age restricted community.
I agree.
Boy,
It's
my
nice
back
living
and my
on
hips
same
been
animals.
feeling lately, I might take you up on it.
I don't disagree with Dan, but there are uses, it seems to me, that we can discuss that could be compatible with
Residential.
residential. I mean, there are others that simply.
Right, like you say, the mineral extraction.
Yeah, I think
that-
that's easy to take off the list.
Right.
Well, and plus, frankly speaking, the reason why mineral extraction is in the R4 district is because that's the only place where there's any mineral to extract. Except, if you want to mine, if you want to blast granite and start doing quarrying on Mountain Road, which is what it used to do, or anywhere else on Route 1, then that's a different animal, but mineral extraction is going to be in R4, because that's where the atmosphere is.
And you said something about the car storage.
Yeah.
You might want to go look at the value
Oh, yeah.
of that building in Portland, because that building is all climate controlled. I've been through the whole building. I've seen all the cars that are in there.
I think this might have been a little different concept, Diane, because this guy wanted to put up individual small garages
Oh, no,
where
no,
a guy
no,
could keep
no.
one or two. It
Yeah.
wasn't just a great big barn, you
Place in
know.
Portland is top
Oh, yeah.
notch.
So what you would really want to attract is you want to attract something like the one in Portland, the guy that owns Southern Maine Motors, a friend of ours. He had a whole bunch of cars and he started it. They had a their own lounge.
The guy had a very, very good
Yes.
concept, and he had taken it quite a ways along, didn't he? He had plans drawn up and everything else, and it was a nice concept that he had. I think his problem was more on the financing than anything else, but this was going to be a high-end deal. One of the reasons that he was talking to us because he was interested in somewhere up on the north end of the BI district, where he wouldn't be very far from Biddeford Airport.
Okay.
Because he said the kind of people that own these very expensive antique
Usually
cars
have
are also the kind of people
Planes.
who own airplanes. And there's a lot of
Full circle, right?
tied in beautifully with the summer cottage deal, because you've got people in that category who might be interested in buying
storing
a
their
summer
car here.
cottage.
because they're not using it.
the cottage.
They're not
Fly
going to
in,
use
you
it
go
in
to your
Connecticut.
cottage, and then for the couple of 3 weeks that you're here during the summer, you can go across the street to your garage and work on your antique car.
We have
Wow.
people that at Red Apple Campground that keep a car here and keep a car in Florida, and they turn around and register their car here, which they're allowed to do because the car is housed in Maine.
But the ones
But
that
they're not
rent
Duesenbergs.
from these, the ones that rent from these facilities, these cars are, yes.
There's
So
one
that's
guy
gonna
that-
be
They're worth
individual
hundreds of
drones,
thousands of
right?
dollars.
So what's that? We'll have individual drones, everybody, don't need to land the ship, and just plop them in front of your yard.
The Jetsons are on and on.
Helicopter
My
takes
only,
less
my
time.
only comment I want to make, and I'm not against riding stable. My concern is if the weekly shows, and now you're congregating a ton of people, a ton of traffic into areas that already have.
So we don't have to start the room with a mandatory case horses.
I love horses.
Okay, that's
They
good.
taste great.
Especially mixed with a little bit of pork.
In reference to just some of the comments, I'd like to throw out just a thought here. If initially what we can do is brainstorm a bunch of possibilities, because probably any one of us can object to any one of those along the way. Let's get a list, and then we can go back over that list and refine it and say, all right, what were we thinking when we suggested this?
Now, we
Because
think
it doesn't-
R1?
Well, as we go through the process.
Okay.
Should
Yeah.
we,
So, I mean, if riding stable is a good idea in general, that'll kind of come out in the wash. If it turns out that as you think about it, no, that's got another issue we haven't thought about, we can always take it off. But let's not be afraid to put something on at this stage of the game.
should
And
we
we
have
might
that with
say,
the planning
okay,
board?
then it might be okay in R2,
Two, but not, right.
but maybe not R1. I don't know.
And I mean, you know, you get things like that, like in an R4 district with somebody with 50 acres or whatever, some type of composting thing, but then you get into that thing like in Lyman where they had this guy bringing in the seas, all this, was it shells or lobster or whatever, and then polluting the streams. So, you know, you have,
Well, that was an execution.
yeah. You know, but again, you have to be careful because composting in one term and composting depending on what.
Well, that's,
It'd be a great compost.
solid waste facility, economic utilization.
I think we should have that discussion with the planning board.
Which one?
on the allowed uses.
Right, but I
So we
think-
brainstorm with the planning board on those uses.
Well, I always
We might
like,
want some of
I
our
always
own.
like to go prepared with something to kick it off, as you may have noticed. So if we can brainstorm our own little list first before we have a meeting and say, this is where we're kind of thinking of going. And yeah, I would absolutely love their input. 'Cause I'm sure
We're
they-
restricting ourselves right now to R1 through 3,
Yes,
correct?
yes,
We haven't even discussed whether R3 is necessary or
that's correct. We'll get there, I guess. I had that same thought. Because, I mean, if you look at the list, there is virtually no difference between R2 and R3.
It's just lot size.
The only thing is, what is it, multifamily housing,
not. Right.
and educational facility.
Between R2 and R3, so.
Yeah,
Yeah. R3 and R4 is basically, I think, minimal instruction.
no, it's,
Lot sizes are different, and
the
R3 and
only,
R4 is.
Don't even get me
R3
started
and
about
R4,
the
the only
setbacks.
difference is the animal units.
The animal units.
Right.
Yeah, that was it.
Wanted dirt.
But again, if we go back to the, you've got 30 acres in R3 and 20 acres in R4,
No.
you can raise more animals in R4 than R3, that makes no sense.
so yeah, maybe eliminating one of those R3 might be a good suggestion. Combine it into one or the other.
Well,
Well,
I think we also, one of the things we will have to tell the planning board is that whether or not we want to make any changes to these designation of the general districts.
Right, and.
Urban
again-
residential, I hate that.
I do too.
I know, urban.
Urban residential.
I have no-
1 acre is not
No, it's
urban.
not like this.
Urban is quarter acre or 10,000 square, well, it's 10,000 square feet.
With lots of concrete.
Nothing
But
but
again-
concrete.
Again, we're not even talking about like the townhouse corners and the gateway and all of that. You know, those will all be into that as well.
Right. We
So,
just
because I
focus
mean, you
right
look
now
at,
on this
you look at
section.
the map down here, the R3 zone, a lot of that at the bottom is gonna be townhouse corners.
Yeah.
And I think it would be a bad idea to continue some of the commercial growth right up Block Avenue, you know, in that
Well,
sense.
there are those who are making that suggestion to go all the way to Route 1.
Well, they're surprisingly absent tonight after they were going to be here in force.
I leave that to you to say.
You know, because, you know, you're,
Well, if we look at R3 in terms of the large acre pieces, most of what's in R3, 14 of the 22 larger parcels are between 10 and 19 acres. So that's a full, that's 2/3 of them are at the small end. And if you look at the totals, 22, 28, counting the split lots, 28 out of 104 are in R3. So that accounts for, call it 28% as close as it needs to be.
It's amazing, R3's got 11 and 11 in north and south.
What I didn't hear the last part of what you said.
11 and 11.
Yeah. Oh, and by the way, if you were to analyze this on a map and take time to do it, you would no doubt find an error someplace because this was very difficult to do without being cross-eyed. I went through it 3 times and made a correction every time. So we might be off on this little chart by a number here and there.
That's her little thing in the bottom.
Well, that's a whole different problem because the tax maps are more recent
Always a
than
year.
that map.
Oh, okay.
And I know those, because in that map, I had to draw a couple lines where lots have been split on the tax maps. So they don't even drive, and then there's just a human error involved in messing with the little sticky tags.
When you look at the table, it almost makes sense to take R3 and R4 and put them together. Never mind the setback issue, but just the table itself, it almost looks like R3
Yeah,
and R4
because
should
it's
be.
virtually the only difference is animal husbandry.
Well, it still comes down to something.
Well, you can- I don't
bring
think
up,
you can
you
have
have to
daycare
bring up the
facilities
issue
either.
of what's rural conservation. It is
Daycare's
important.
limited in-
It's not.
It's not. That's my contention. It's not working.
So,
What do we want to do?
Well, I don't,
Your home?
let's go back to R1 and R2 and they.
No, I agree, we'll drive off
down
the
there.
R4 bridge when we get there.
Yeah,
In Iowa.
Okay.
for your patrol.
My control,
Let's go.
just relocate to Chapel.
All right, well, we're pushing 9 o'clock. So if I can make a suggestion that we do a little personal brainstorming between now and our next get-together to come up with some more potential uses and thoughts for R1 and R2 in particular. Does that make sense? Back to the agenda here. Our next regular meeting date would be August 5th, which is the first Tuesday.
August? Oh, that's right,
Yes,
today's
today's
July.
July 1st.
How many weeks from today is that?
4, I believe. No, it might be 5. Or
I'd
5.
like for it to be 5.
It's 5, because
Good, because that'll make cold working.
July is a long month.
Okay.
Does anybody want to meet more often than that?
Not in the summertime.
I just thought I'd throw that out in case you guys really need to.
Nice try, Donna. Nice try.
Okay.
I was gonna say something, but I guess.
So you're talking the 5th?
Yep.
August
No,
5th?
we're pleading the
Bring one.
fifth. We're pleading the fifth.
And then,
Forget it.
in terms of, are we inviting the planning board to that meeting so they can brainstorm with us?
If you would like to make it formal, yes, you can do that.
Does that make sense to everybody? So we can talk about R1, R2 all together in a file?
You think we ought to work up some suggestions for larger lots in the R1 and R2 before getting together
Should
with
we,
the planning board?
should we send suggestions to you?
You do
So
that?
that way they'd be like consolidated?
Yeah, I don't mind being the clearinghouse for that.
I won't have a wish. So maybe it wouldn't be a bad idea to have some more stuff.
All right, so we'll hold them off till September?
Well, they've got their own stuff they have to work on
Oh, yeah.
right now with
All right,
this.
yeah, that makes sense. Let's not jump the gun.
And I don't think
Look
you're
at what we're
doing
doing.
anything,
Right.
frankly speaking, I don't think you're doing anything that they haven't thought of or anything that would make the alarms go off at this point.
And they're a ways from the residential districts anyways.
Right,
They're
I'm
still
just,
in
well, I'm just
business.
thinking they have enough on their plate right
Yeah,
now.
they're
trying to
away
get
from
some of this
even
stuff
discussing a
ready.
residential district, so at this point, we put our stuff together and then we'll get with them and give them a couple of meetings to iron out the hot items that they gotta iron out.
Makes sense to me. Okay, so we'll, next meeting date will be August 5th without the planning board. Unless we're over on time.
7 o'clock here.
Yep. And Sean's suggestion, in case you didn't hear it, was if you want us, if you have ideas for the additional uses, if you want to send them to me, I'll put together a list so we have it all on one page for the next go around. Then we can discuss that and add to it. Maybe if we need to.
Anything that's going in the R1 gotta go through me first.
A gatekeeper.
I'll see if I can come up with something particularly
It's
exciting.
gonna be a gated community.
Well, I gotta figure something to do with my 10 acres, so.
And Tad, it's 100 in our form, the front
Yeah, I
setback.
think that's too much.
Yeah, but if you look at the tiny little footnote there, it says, unless you're on an arterial road, you can't fit.
Is that
Or
what
if
it
you
says?
Yes, it's
Or if
right there.
it's
That's
a-
one of the landmines we're trying to correct.
It's,
one of the
well, isn't
zoning-
it also that if all the neighbors are 50 and the new setback is
That's
30,
another one.
you can line up with your
So I'm
neighbors?
gonna put my house closer?
Yes,
Yes.
yes. Because if your neighbors are all there, you can get closer.
See, it's a standard, but not really all the time.
Yeah.
If it's like on Thursday, it's a full moon,
And if it rains the previous Tuesday.
then it's 150.
Front yard setback will be used to 50 for back lots for lot without frontage on arterial collectors.
I don't believe Thompson Road is an arterial one.
going to walk.
We're not on Thompson Road. we're on
Even
Turk.
better, isn't it?
That's all.
Cool one.
To both.
Well, actually, it keeps me away from the lilies that I can't even put my laundry out.
But what you can do on that front lawn, you can raise 60 pigs.
That's
Because
true.
you're an R.
Or
No,
400 chickens.
And the feet's long enough for a runaway.
The neighborhood.
Oh, no, I'd like to stick up the neighborhood. I'd
I've
like
already
to
done
Okay,
it.
nobody's adjourned, are we still meeting, or?
Yes, this is all being recorded, by the way.
58.
Sean?
Seconded.
All those in favor?
I had to have a sheriff come down last Monday night.
Put up a razor